got no game.
Spades.
Good number of everybody. Is everybody else good?
Yeah.
You good? Yeah. Cool.
Federal leasing for fossil fuel extraction directly draws up as a quarter of all U.S. CO2 emissions and causes separate supply chain and development impacts on the climate. And Trump is expanding leasing while reversing Obama-era regulations granted in 2018. A scientific report found oil drilling, coal mining, and federal land has a significant impact on the climate. The extracting and burning of fossil fuels federal land may be a quarter of all carbon dioxide emissions. The U.S. consumption of all coal, oil, and gas from federal onshore and offshore holdings represent 23.7%. Carbon dioxide emissions, 7.3%, 1.5% of methane and nitrous oxide. Nitrous dioxide emissions. The USGS also assessed emissions beginning to end the supply chain. Methane seeps into the air from pipelines. Abandoning coal mines, carbon releases, result of lawsuits, treating federal forests. The U.S. has the potential to curb global warming by resetting public land policy and fossil fuel leasing. Trump has done the opposite. The president pursued leasing on more federal acreage. In addition to rolling back Obama rules, warming causes extinction, leaving fossil fuels in the ground as Key Shell 16. There is consensus there show window to reduce emission before adjusted device federal projections is an average 10 Fahrenheit by 2050. Incredibly disruptive all life permanent extinction was caused by rapid increase in temperature, sudden release of methane. Is a possibility extinction would be a natural effect. That of extinction is not sudden threat. Worse than changes of extinction with climate change good. It is important to leave fossil fuel reserves in the ground. Climate change is linear, reducing emissions. Any amount solves mass suffering, and every degree counts. Walls 19. It's not too late. Global warming is not binary. It is a problem that gets worse. The longer we produce greenhouse gases, the better if we choose to stop the next decade getting more warming, suffering, or less warming and suffering. How much is up to us at about 2 degrees? I teacher rate expected to begin class bringing as much as 50 sea level. Sea rise. Major cities in Ecuador band become unlevel. Can only conventional methods of decarbonization. This is probably our best case. 2 degrees would be terrible, but it's better than 3 hours. Points out the European permanent drought. African drought challenge would last 5 years, and 3 degrees is much better than 4. The number of climate refugees could grow 20-fold. Climate change is real. Consensus of scientists. Skeptics are funded by fossil fuel companies. Watts 1970 consensus that humans cause warming and likely past 99% of these studies show there's never been a period in the last 2,000 years when temperature changes have been as fast and extensive. Previous studies have shown near unanimity among climate scientists that human factors are responsible for warming. 97% of climate scientists agree, and 12,000 academic papers put back has been political rather than scientific. Right-wing think tank, the Competitive Enterprise Institute, received funding from the American Fuel and Petrochemical Manufacturers and Coke Institute. Plan the United States federal government ought to eliminate federal land and water leases for fossil fuel extraction. Ending current leases alone and conservatively cuts at least 100 million tons of emissions. Short-term massive progress towards capping at 2 degrees. Carbon 16. Phasing out fossil fuel leases would be one of the most significant policies to meet international climate goals. Emissions of carbon dioxide could drop by 100 million tons if the Interior Department stopped issuing renewing leases. The studies among the most detailed assessments published about a quarter of U.S. fossil fuel energy comes from federal land. Subsidized leases lock in high carbon infrastructure. Restricting coal leases to cut annual emissions by 107 million tons. Restricting oil leases to cut emissions by 54 million. Phasing out all leasing would have to 100 million tons of emissions reduction in 2030 and more. Later use other policies would be much less effective. Across the board regulation would cut emissions just 13 million tons. Studies suggest to be consistent with the 2 degree goal, the U.S. cut aggregate production by 40 to 44% by 2040, even accounting for supply response. Ending leasing cuts emissions by 280 megatons on net by 2030, and solvency gets magnified after by international follow-on and increased dependence on leases for production post 2030. Erickson and Lazarus 18. We estimate ceasing new leasing and not renewing existing leases. The U.S. Department of Interior would avoid the production of 820,000 barrels per day, the equivalent of 110 megatons CO2 for a net decrease of 39 megatons CO2 for whole restrictions would reduce production by about 490 megatons CO2, resulting in a net overall reduction of 240 megatons CO2. Ceasing to issue new and renewed leases for fossil fuel extraction reduce global CO2 and global net CO2 emissions by about 280 megatons per year by 2030. Broader implications could be more profound. New leases account for a majority of fossil fuel production after 2030. If other countries also constrain fossil fuel production, effects of the lease restrictions would be amplified. Framework. The standard is maximizing expected well-being. 1. Only consequentialism explains degrees of wrongness. If I break a promise to meet up after lunch, that is not as bad as breaking a promise to take a dying person to the hospital. Only consequentialism. Only the consequences of breaking the promise explain why the second one is much worse than the first. 2. Actor specificity. Governments must aggregate because their policies benefit some and harm others. The only non-arbitrary way to prioritize it is by helping the most amount of people. Actor specificity comes first because different ages have different ethical obligations. Back 4. When the decision involves more other issues, have to be considered. Obviously, may not score with the most advantageous policy society. More expenses for one mean less for another because of the scarcity of resources. Ethics are for rationally justified standards for the resolution of interpersonal conflict. Distributive questions should maximize welfare policy be judged solely in terms of resulting utilities. 3. For nominal introspection, it's the most epistemically reliable historical morals agreement over internal conceptions and morality. Questions such as race, gender, class, etc. prove the fallibility of non-observational waste. Ethics introspection means we value happiness because we can determine that we value it that we each value just as I observe a lemon's yellowness. We can make those judgments about happiness. 4. No intent to voice a distinction. A. If we foresee a consequence that becomes part of our deliberation, which makes it intrinsic to our action since we intended to have it. B. Governments cannot have intents they're made up of multiple different actors who lack unified intent. 5. Reject calculations. A. Substantively false calculations are nonsense and philosophers laugh at them. Hard in 90. One contributor that if I take count and calculate the course of action will cease to be open to me. It should be embarrassed philosophers that they have ever taken the seriously parallel considerations of the realm themselves are dismissed to escape unending calculation. We do not maximize. We stop calculating when we find adequate choice when one cannot know what is. That's one can nevertheless be sure that calculating is not the best choice. The point of it is almost never an issue of practice. We are too reasonable to bring the world to a standstill. B theory, they're functionally nibs that everyone knows are silly but skew the F and move the debate away from the topic. An actual philosophical debate killing valuable education to clarify that straw of the argument. 6. Extinction is a distinct phenomenon. Actually, I'm not going to read the Burke evidence. Theory. 1 year theory. A, the F gets because otherwise the 1 and C could engage in unchecked infinite abuse which outweighs anything else. B, it drops the debate because the 2 AR is too short to win a shell and substance. So theory can only check abuse to the F if it's a win condition. C, no negative VR because otherwise they get done with the shell for 6 minutes and get away with anything by sheer brute force. 2, eliminate doesn't have to be 100%. Prefer legal interpretation over misapplied dictionaries. 8, Circuit Court of Appeals. 11. We disagree with the most absolute complete definitions of eliminated coordinates when it was the text and steal the context and makes a fortress out of a dictionary, not reading reasonably method. Focused debate over policy inculcates the necessary information processing and reasoning skills to critically analyze claims of fact and engage in politics. Giving up on deliberation sees the public steward of right-wing information like the fact that Saddam had WMDs, leak 16. Political engagement helps the students develop skills to make possible teaching, understanding, and engagement. It involves helping students find issues they can be passionate about while staying open to opposing views. Students need a thoughtful approach to politics. Policy deepens political learning and promotes skills essential to engagement. Students engage multiple perspectives, affirmative and negative research and develop materials used in speeches. Students develop information literacy and make critical arguments. Practice is politically empowering for students to build confidence. For political engagement, policy making foster extended information literacy, understanding policy, also complementing range of materials, news, core proceedings, research, and propaganda debate motivate students to go beyond basic information to achieve advanced expertise. Students pay attention to critics of the argument to respond to this attack. Lower information gathering can aid in recognizing when and how knowledge can effectively translate to specific context. Politicians are viewed as political actors interested in power and profit rather than truth. Arguments about policy are based in fact. Public deliberation requires information gathering, evaluation, and reasoning. Bush's decision and accusation of the facts Saddam had WMDs is for example. This example of poor policy grounded in faulty evidence that precisely why debate is valuable. Students use literacies to mitigate the absence of fact-finding from traditional institutions. Policy advocacy gives students experience testing claims of fact source credibility comparisons and data analysis. Knowledge is always contextual and fracture specificity is the only way to verify the one is truth claims. Focusing debate on our assumptions in the abstract is intellectual hubris and makes solving any impact impossible. Late 14. I prefer Parkinson's paradox rather than war between as lot could be inclusive that the age of nuclear weapons. We need all help we can. There's no monopoly on knowledge. No guarantee anyone have with one with anyone. Epistemology or ontology is always and everywhere more useful to assert, otherwise it's an active intellectual hubris paradigm always because he can contest over the true status of assumptions, declarations, that I am a realist were statements of faith, not conclusions that follow by that follow from a falsifiable theory with empirical support. Confronting governments with catastrophic imagery is essential to reorient environmental policy. Back 14. If you firmly CC as a fundamental threat that might bring transformative turn, this is immense supporting catastrophes, a global risk or return of the price war and capitalism is confronted with its errors. The significance lies in the moment it generates re-emergence of politics, allowing us to imagine new beginnings. Risk can be made into communities, includes necessity. Marked in necessity. Did you get the other stuff?
Yeah.
Okay.
Classics.
Yep.
Cool. What is the terminal impact of the F?
There's a few. I would say the affirmative makes the claim that it solves existential warming, which would likely
Where's
cause
that evidence?
the Schultz evidence. Or are you asking about the solvency?
No, the evidence that says warming means extinction is
The Schultz evidence describes it as existential, disruptive to all life. The last time warming was this rapid, 95% of all life died.
So the Wells evidence talks about how the affirmative is only a linear change and does not solve
so
the entire
the Wells is not about solvency, it's an impact, it's impact framing that says even if you were to win, that the affirmative doesn't resolve all climate change. Reducing emissions is good because it reduces the degree to which people
are. I just want to clarify, this evidence says we need to bring warming to at least 2 degrees is the minimum threshold, then that is a linear impact, right? Because the evidence is saying 3 degrees, people will object by saying 3 degrees is too much, but we need 2 degrees. That is something that creates tangible change, right?
Going past 2 degrees would be bad, going past 3 degrees would be bad. Each degree is worse. If we get
but the evidence is saying that 2 degrees is a threshold, right?
It's saying it's a threshold for some impacts, but not every extinction.
What other impacts that you...
Sure, so it talks about at 3 degrees there would be worse things.
I understand. What happens at before 2 degrees that your evidence said that you spoke?
Oh, if we get under 2 degrees?
Yeah.
Then we avoid major effects.
No, sorry. If we
I'm confused by...
what if the F does not reduce, it does not get to the 2 degrees?
Oh, it doesn't get below 2 degrees. We still solve the impacts of those other degrees.
What other degrees is
so if we were to increase by more than 3 degrees, that would be really bad. Do you see?
Okay, but what? Okay, cool. The intent foresight distinction argument.
Yep.
If I'm somebody inside the government and I want to whistle blow, the government threatens to kill my family, and I foresee that as a consequence of whistleblowing, my family will die. Am I obligated underneath consequentialism to whistleblow on the government doing messed up shit?
One, we would argue the government's obligated not to do that. Two,
wait, no, that's not my question though.
No,
I
two,
think we do live in
let
a
me
perfect
finish.
world.
Two,
yeah.
whistleblow on what? Is whistleblow on tax theft? Obviously not. But if it's whistleblow on the government, having camps where they round up people and torture and kill them.
What about corruption?
Corruption to what extent? Just theft? Probably not. It seems to me that theft would matter less than 10 people dying.
Okay, no, okay, that's fine. The phenomenal introspection argument, you say, quote, just as I can observe a lemon's yellowness, we can make judgments about happiness.
Mm-hmm.
Where's the warrant in this argument?
The way we sensorily experience.
I just want to clarify what the warrant was inside the one you see. You literally said, I can see a lemon is yellow, therefore we all experience
You can
happiness.
observe a lemon's yellowness the same way you can use your senses to observe happiness.
I observe my happiness. How do I observe other people's happiness?
We can do things like scientific studies. We know how chemicals work in the brain.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that just didn't seem to me. Yeah, that's okay. You didn't read Extinction, right?
I didn't read the break evidence, no.
Okay, the hardened evidence talks about, like, it doesn't say, like, philosophers laugh at them, it says, like, a philosopher laughs at other philosophers.
It says philosophers who
Seems
do it should be
power-tagged.
laughed at.
Okay.
Like,
Okay. Sure. Why does it not? So this seems to be like an argument that responds to cascading. Like we
it
should
responds to like a lot of the ones that are like, what if we kept calculating? There's infinite consequences, things of that nature. By saying utilitarianism, you like cut stuff off at a reasonable point.
Okay. Cool. Got it. That's cross-ex. I'll take that. Oh, you're timing. I just realized I didn't turn it
Oh,
down.
sorry.
Is anybody timing in this room? Does anybody have any suggestion of what to do? I can like subtract a minute.
Whatever you think is fair.
It's like a minute fair for everybody. Yeah. Everybody okay with that? Okay. Starting time plus a minute. Sorry about that. Start prep 1:30 used. 2:30 left. Sending this speech talk now.
How many sheets should I grab?
5 decides then K. No, I'm kidding. NCAC. Can I use your stand, David?
Yeah, for sure. His case framework then.
Yeah. And there are like some cards in the doc for case. I'll just like send this what I get to and what I do. Let me know when everyone's good. Everybody else good?
1 second. I'm good.
Niko? Good. To negate means deny the truth of this has two implications. First, you presume there are more reasons why a statement might not be true than the ones directly proved statement. Two, second, permissibly for his odd negative after burden truth moral obligation that what odd entails is proving permissibly distinct from obligation when the criterion is consistent in the moral sentiments. First, our actions like represent quality. This action can generate a contradiction reason only with sentiment practice passion represent quality branch a copy of any other existing modification contradiction truth of reason consistent disagreement of ideas considered copies that have objects which they represent. Therefore, reason can immediately prevent producing action by contradicting and proving it because action then becomes suitable for this reason. Reason not a specific perspective mission. But is that our actions are rationally rational, even if actions actually not. It can be a moral contradiction. There's no tension between saying excellent I'm doing excellence wrong with some religion, my feelings and sentiments about excess. We have to look at sentiments, some feel concerning actions, sentiments to influence our actions, thus represent intending actions. Second, admit attitudes are core into action as far as the government intention to kill someone intentionally instead of merely forcing the death to have a prior attitude toward that feature of my action. But that makes it agency that matter. Attitude saying deciding what I should do means deciding what attitudes I should have towards the actions available to me. That is 8 point every moral theory collapses sentimentalism. B point all moral theories must be consistent with innate sentiments. They can't demand patterns of attitude from us that we're incapable of. Third, moral theories demand compliance because morality is designed to form a universal system mutual channel upon individuals. Agents don't follow guides that prescribe counterintuitive actions. You know what would actually push a famine of the bridge to save the many because it conflicts with their innate sentiments against that which means only sentimentalism can demand compliance or be reliable as a kind of action. I contend that limiting fossil fuel subsidies against our innate sentiments. First, humans have an innate evolutionary sentiment that prevents them from infringing upon the environment or allows them to infringe upon the environment. Reese, the human brain is evolved in 3 phases: the reptilian, the limbic, and the neocortex. The reptilian is concerned with autonomic function, social behavior. The neocortex is responsible for cognition. Under particular circumstances, one subbrain may assume the dominant role. The individual may not be aware of part of the brain is in control. This is important in the context of unsustainability. Humans think they're uniquely rational. Western society overestimates the power of reason. We live in conscious conferred by the consciousness and conferred by the neocortex remain unaware of critical influences over our behavior from lower brain centers. Much of human behavior is shaped in part by subconscious processes and chemical agents in situations of resource scarcity, predispositions that operate beneath consciousness may override logic. Interactions with ecosystem structures are biologically determined in all species, including humans, that realities that all systems a species will consume until acted upon by outside force release. The biological drivers are reproductive survival instincts that humans share with all species. Unless constrained by negative feedback, all species population can expand to use all available resources. Competition for resources. Evolution favors those who satisfy short-term needs. Despite negative consequences, tend to see discount the features evolved by natural selection. This is not a cultural human trait, but it's characteristic of any species evolved by Darwinian selection. The implications: 8 point, the belief in our unique ability to regulate ecosystems is the source of ecosystem destruction, which means I control root cause. B point, inability to constrain our consumption means you can't have increased new negative. Second, the right to liberties and evolutionary adaptation by individuals to form an innate moral sentiment against domination by others. Restricted freedom of action means wholesale elimination of the subsidies that harms ability to access energy is prohibited. Height, the liberty, pressure, foundation, adaptive challenges linking smokers, individuals. Original tools include substance, signs of attempt to domination, including controlling behavior, awful meal. The term can trigger from anger, sometimes called reactions, feeling like an authority tells you can't do something. The rise would be dominated. The people don't suffer oppression in private. The rise would be dominated triggers motivation, needs equal services. Third, the negative defense a negative right and not taking with the ability to live our lives without interference from the state, while the active is an active order which controls our lives. We form stronger sentiments in response to action. Nega always outweighs Franca. The subject for harmful mission, less harmful commissions. The verse effect for good outcomes was not found. Few subjects for evil, which is have greater harm in order to avoid action. Now, the utilitarianism fails for a couple of reasons. 8 point, that problem induction. The past is not reliable for the future. We can't use induction for induction. That would be circular. B point, they're cascading. Each consequence is not the consequence, and not the consequence. Any brother is arbitrary and self-serving for the position. C point, retroactive. We judge actions under consequential after they occurred, which means we cannot assign them a status prior to the action, which means there's no obligation to the affirmative. D point is there's no aggregation possible. For example, 1 migraine versus 5 headaches, or different types of pleasures, eating, sleeping, living, etc. They will just say it's a question of a death canon and structural impacts is a question. No, your theory must be comprehensive and apply to all situations. Otherwise, it's not an ethical theory. Now, the lemma and the degrees of wrongness argument. 8 point is no, you can. It's impossible to do different extinction scenario ways, which means you can't do degrees and wrongness. B point, there's no implication. This, for example, communism would say that intent and contradiction, conception versus contradiction of the will are different types of intent. The degrees we can weigh between. C point, my firm can weigh. You just need to ask in cross-examination or make actual arguments. For example, which sentiment controls the other, or which one evolutionarily evolved first, or which one we have selectively preferred. Now, the A-spec argument. One is fallacy. Just because governments use util does not mean odd. Second is the constituents generally go to the polls voting based on what they feel about candidates, what the sentiments they have, which means it hijacks their framing. Third is that imperially not governments don't send all their GDP to poor countries, and they have side interests like constitution. D point is we hijacks the question of compliance. Only sentimentalism can demand compliance from agents. Phenomenal introspection. This argument is ridiculous. There's no link. Just because I saw a lemon was yellow does not mean I know other people feel happiness. Couple arguments. One is masochism disputes, but just because I feel pain does not mean other people do not feel pleasure from pain. Second is means we only introspect our own experience, which means we could come to conclusion about other people by phenomenal introspection. Is literally understanding the way we interact with phenomenology, not other people. Third is sentimentalism hijacks something that's intrinsic to moral judgment, because each attitude necessarily expresses some sort of feeling. For example, when we say boo pleasure, boo pain, that is a form of sentimentalism, which means I necessarily hijack. Then the intent force distinction argument. 8 point leads us being held hostage by other scenarios. For example, terrorists can threaten to blow up a building if we do not comply with them, but that means we cannot take ethical action. Or a whistleblowing example I referenced in Consequentialism. B point, it realizes us being able to know what we can reliably foresee, which presumes consequentialism in the first place. They say reject Calgenius. They're one or the laughing argument. 8 point is just one philosopher. B point, no, this just means your framework is incomplete. It's not a philosophy. We can just fill in the gaps and claim, oh, my intuition would solve it. C point is no, this is about cascading, not the problem induction, which is probably what the tuner will go for. The theory argument doesn't make sense. Insofar as I'm not trying to presumption or permissibility off of it. That's actually everything. Yeah, cool. Time to read some cards from the doc. Skipping the Enoch stuff. Skipping the English article stuff, I'm going to start with the ISSA. Removing all subsidies would decrease emission by 5%. Mac, the F is an even smaller drop in the bucket. IASA 18, removing subsidies would have only small effect on CO2 emissions. Renewable use by 2030 would be 1 to 5% lower than if subsidies had been maintained. The removal of subsidies causes a switch to more emission-intensive cooler rate per unit. Energy is not high enough to have an effect on global energy demand. Subsidy removal would not be renewable use because it is so cheaper to reduce energy demand than subsidy fuels renewable. 50% global reduction is needed before 2 degrees. The affirmative is not enough. It's stern 18. The path that would require annual emissions fall by 50%. What the evidence cut off 50%. Anyways, increasing versus solvency. We think we've actually done past meaningful climate policy, but this status quo proves that we think we've done something like the Paris Agreement, whereas actually nothing happens global, which means which destroys our ability to actually combat climate change. I'm reading the next piece of evidence. Their advocate authors say that alpha would stimulating added production from other sources, rapid efficient renewables, cause resources, multiple hotspots, Freeman and Basile 18. The global transition to clean energy creates new challenges. Clean energy metals are in constant in certain areas and subject to contest over their control of clean energy responsible forms of conflict, aggressive violence, and state within weak institutions, competition in global commons, and weaponization of minerals. The GRC produces 60% of cobalt, increased demand, and could further intensify conflicts. The Arctic Ocean, the SCS can both contain a mental metal deposit exploration to drive countries to take certain claim for forcefully Beijing its mining capacities, which contribute to its control over the seabed. China's willingness to violate sovereign claims. This conflict would aggravate these disputes. The Lima land of their evidence. They isolate that we need at least 2 degrees of warming to solve any sort of linear impact, which is what what their evidence literally says, which means if they've not reached that threshold, they're not able to solve any impacts. Any other arguments are speculative. Me stopping using a car probably helps warming in 0.0001%, but they have to prove actual tangible impacts in the material world are able to happen. Their impact actions, they say that 10% subsidies will necessarily, or like the reduction of leasing will necessarily be able to solve. No, it's a question of whether or not that leasing actually creates a tangible climate change. Even if it does, that requires a shift to renewables, which would necessarily trigger the scenario of the they said. I'm going to read the this paradox argument real quick. The English article. As a model becomes more complete, becomes less understandable, point of uselessness, how as a model becomes more realistic, less realistic, by definition wouldn't reflect the real world. English article 13, all models break down within the physical, mathematical, or worded description. No model can completely describe what describes an object. As you make it more and more accurate, you need even more accurate information. There's even more clutter. You need an expert to interpret the information. Cut it information.
Okay, wait, where was that?
It's right above the stuff I read on case. English in article 13. I cut at accurate or interpret the information, which actually I think gets to the paradox, so that's good. Yeah.
How do we find out other people's sentiments?
Sure. So the argument is that sentiments are not something that are like agent relative, i.e. like each person has different sentiments, but rather the things that are genetically or evolutionarily being coded to us, and like so we can understand like how our psyche expresses itself in certain ways.
How do we establish like truths about genetics and evolution, observationally or like?
No, the argument is like these things are like deductively or genetically true. The evidence, like for example, the recent evidence talks about the difference.
How do we observe genetic facts?
It's not a question of observation, but rather like for example, gravity exists independent of me seeing gravity exists. Like when I drop a pen, for example, right, it falls to the ground. I do not need to see the pen falling to know that it drops because I deductively know via science. I can use physics to like theorize or postulate that would like, happen. The same thing exists for like the chemicals in our brain or the makeup in our brain. That's the recent evidence.
Okay, but so how do we know those chemicals exist?
Similarly, the argument is, I do not know gravity exists absent experience, but the point is gravity exists a priori, right?
Yeah, you can prove gravity with like math, but how can you prove that there are chemicals in your brain that cause
I think like this is just descriptively true that we have a certain chemical makeup or genetics like or DNA like
that really seems to rely on empirical observations.
No, I think the argument is genetic makeup exists whether or not I need to like go and like draw my DNA or whatever people do.
Okay. The Reese evidence. Mm-hmm. So the first thing says humans have an innate evolutionary sentiment that prevents them from infringing.
Yeah, that's a mistag. I've rephrased it when I was reading it.
Oh, okay.
That doesn't prevent them from infringing on the environment. Sorry, yeah.
Why does the fact that it doesn't prevent them from infringing on the environment like negate?
Sure. So this Reese evidence, the second piece of Reese evidence talks about how if our interactions are biologically determined, we cannot violate something that like is a constraint on our action.
Okay. The liberty argument. How does the F violate liberty?
The affirmative like prevents us from is a wholesale elimination, which means access to energy or access to subsidies is like violated in the rule of the F.
Wait, so how is that a negative right if you're arguing that people should have something?
No, the argument is that like we should not do the affirmative. I'm not saying we ought to. Wait, we ought. Yeah, no, the affirmative is saying we ought not do an action, which is a negative action, right?
So what is the distinction then if the affirmative is saying we should stop taking an action as opposed to
No, the affirmative is not saying we should stop using subsidies, we should eliminate using subsidies. That's an active action. The affirmative is not an omission.
That seems really semantic.
Okay.
The
implication of that is.
Argument for Hardin is just this is incomplete and doesn't answer induction fails.
One, just because like a philosopher said so that people should laugh at it, it's probably not a claim that should be given philosophical credence. Second, the argument is like, fine, we can laugh at them all we want, but that just means util is not a complete ethical theory. Like, if we can say like, if your affirmative evolves too well, let's just like, quote, reasonably assume certain things happen, does not seem justified to me. The third argument is only takes out cascades, or like cascading consequences.
Time. We're on track. Yeah. How do we weigh between conflicting intuitions?
Conflicting intuitions?
Or, I mean, sentiments.
Yeah, this argument was done on the degrees of wrongness claim that you make. For example, we can weigh like which one evolutionary evolved first, or like which one controls the intro into accessing the other one, or which one has been selected for more.
Okay. Okay, what's done?
So like what, 17 seconds left?
What?
17 seconds left, something like that?
Yeah.
What's the order?
Case in the order of advantage, util, the the calc indite overview. Or wait, actually, I'm gonna take one more second of starting now. Okay, 5.
Is it 7 seconds?
Yeah. Advantage, util, util fails, overview, yeah, see.
Oh wait, I just want to cover the doc. It's just like the.
It's just the one. Yeah. Okay. Everybody good? Okay, cool.
Federal fossil fuel leases drive massive CO2 emissions and necessitate development infrastructure that magnify environmental harms, ending leasing cuts emissions by over 280 megatons, which substantially covers one another. Evidence is talking about the affirmative plan. The Stern 18 that just says we need 50% to get below 2 degrees. They conceded that we're 25%, which means to get halfway to 2 degrees, which is sufficient to avoid existential warming, which is like 5 to 6 degrees. Which true, we access our impact, and any reduction is a good thing. Which was the 19 evidence conceded there. Freeman and Brazilian evidence, they didn't get to a terminal impact, which means there's no reason why case doesn't outweigh. Also, we don't say the entire global economy would transition to renewables, just that 20% of the U.S. energy sector would transition, which means to do that we don't need to get below 2 degrees to access any of our impacts. If we get below 3, 4, or 5 degrees, that's still a major impact and prevents tons of people from dying. I'll answer the paradox there at the very end when I'm extending some of the framework stuff. The framework. First argument I'm going for is actor specificity. They conceded that it outweighs because different actors have different ethical standings. The line by line, they said it's an is-off fallacy. No, it's not. It's about how the structure of government necessitates that they have to be able to weigh between things. Otherwise, it's arbitrary and not something they could ever justify because governments have limitations on resources. They have one police car to send to 2 different crimes. Where do they send the police car? Proves they have to weigh between things. They say people use polls and the government voted on that. No, that's abhorrent. If the government always voted on polls, they would have done things like kept slavery or massive rights violations place just because the majority of the public supported it. Third, they say empirically, there are side constraints, but this is an is-off fallacy compared to our explanation of government. This is about how governments have to operate. The next argument we're going for is no intent foresight distinction. They draw both the justifications. First, if you know that something is going to happen, it's necessarily included in your deliberations. Meaning you intend it to happen, even though they're winning. The intent foresight distinction necessarily isn't true, but this proves that foresight collapses to intent, because if you know what happens, then you intend it to happen in the first place. They also drop the government's unique. They can't have an intent foresight distinction because there's no way to verify the intent of government, which also takes out sentiments because governments could never have a sentiment or any sort of internal feeling that we could verify. The law line, their hostage taking argument just had no explanation if taking a hostage, but if complying with demands would prevent more people from being harmed, then that would be a good thing. The foresight stuff gets answered by the util charges, the no-calc stuff, the no-calc indicts. Their response to Harding were bad. They just say that it's incomplete, it doesn't answer, it only answers cascading, but it proves all their cascading take-out indicts don't apply because we can cut off calculation at a reasonable level and proves that util can be modified. They dropped that the argument just said it's not about triggers. No, this is that util triggers permissibility arguments or the util failure arguments are bad, blippy, and not accepted within philosophy and cause the debate to collapse to 2-second arguments, proven by the fact that the 1 and C spammed out a bunch of these arguments they say, which proves that you should reject them in the first place. This is also a reason you should reject the paradox that was put in the 1C because it's the same sort of argument where it's flippy, not a reason the affirmative is a bad idea, and also didn't have any explanation. It was just sort of we can't know knowledge, we need to get more specific, which is answered by all the reasons why calc indites don't apply, because we can get enough knowledge to act. Now the util indicted overview. The induction fails argument 1, we can deduce that induction works by logic because we know if some of the conditions in the past were the same, then logically there would be no reason why they would see a different outcome in the status quo. Second, modus ponens, you just sort of assume some things are true necessary for argumentation, i.e. how do you know that when you click vote and submit your ballot that you're voting for Animesh if you think they're winning this argument, which proves that you sort of need to assume induction for some arguments. The cascading argument was they dropped Harding. What is reasonable, what we can foresee is what we're responsible for, not every possible consequence. The retroactive stuff just false. We can predict the consequences, which what the affirmative does. The aggregation argument, no, because the government's looking at larger scale impact between large amounts of people, not whether or not somebody gets their favorite kind of ice cream independently. We prove that it in general works. Our theory doesn't have to be perfect or entirely comprehensive as long as it's usable for action, and we win that it's necessity by governments, the NC. First, in overview, governments can't have intent or any sort of sentiment, which was the conceded B point of the intent voice of distinction, which means there's no way to know how government's obligations derive if it comes from sentiment. Second is that they have an explanation of how we derive in sentiment is sort of based off this evolutionary biology, which is necessarily based on empirical observation, which means they can't go for any of those induction fails arguments because we need to be able to observe things and know that that was true in the past. Their first argument about how people can ignore their gut feelings or sentiments and act against them, which proves that we are always governed by our sentiments. The intent voice of distinction answers their second argument, how attitudes collapse framework. The sentimentality argument we can use, if you should just vote on how you feel, vote if you think you have a good idea, and ignore the NC. The contention. Their first argument turned, there's no future for us to consume or continue enacting the environment, which proves evolutionary instincts outweigh to not die, which proves death turns the NC because our biggest evolutionary instinct would be to not die, which is the basis of all evolution. Their second argument about freedom is nonsense. It obviously infringes freedom far more for people to have to do things like be taxed and give their subsidies to fossil fuel companies. Their last argument about being a negative right makes no sense. The idea that companies need or should receive fossil fuel subsidies is a positive right, not a negative right, because they're receiving a benefit.
Cool. I had 2:30 left, starting now. What was the response to the freedom argument on the NC?
It's like in turn, the government has to tax people and then transfer their money to corporations, which infringes on freedom more than it not doing that.
The order will be the NC and the AC. The NC is just going to start with the overview David made. The overview David made, then the NC line by line, and then the AF starting on the framework, and then the like on case decide about wars, resource wars. Yeah, sorry, it's long. I'll make sure to signpost, but the NC starting in the overview the tuner makes, or 1AR makes, and then the top down, AF framework, then the resource wars descent. That was read on case. Registered in Brazilian. Okay, is everybody good? Right. Quickly going to go through the review. The first argument they say, we don't know the intent of government, so it's not a question of who's in government, what the government is, but who's in government, and how we come about these obligations. If I want an argument by only my firm can reliably motivate action, it's a question of how we can motivate the government to act, how we motivate the one to pass the policy of the friend, which means I'm winning it internally. The second argument they say about empirical observation, they point, no sentimentalism is something that's innate to humans, just as I know that when I drop the pin, gravity will act on it. It's not a question of whether or not I've experienced it, but rather the fact that it exists deductively. Second, even if they won this argument, that just means that it triggers presumed permissibility. If both of our frameworks are inductive and induction fails, that means that there's no ethical theory in the round, at which point permissibility does flow negative. The line by line, the top level framing, I'm going for presumption permissibility do flow negative. It will probably be triggered on some parts of the flow in the tuner. Unfortunately, the presumption debate with the presumption basis, we assume things to be false because there are infinite ways to prove the one is false. There are more ways to prove the one is false, and there are two infinity versus one. They also permissibly flow because they have a burden to prove some sort of obligation. That is what until the line by line, the line by line, the framing. The first argument they say we can just ignore our gut feelings. That is the point of the common evidence. When we ignore our gut feelings, we feel some sort of internal tension. When I do not push the famine off the bridge, I feel no tension whatsoever. But when I do push the famine off the bridge, I feel some sort of internal tension between what sentiment I have against restriction of freedom versus the action I've just committed, which means only my framework established a contradiction between ethical and unethical arguments, which means it can only be reliably motivation. Motivation is the top layer of this framework. It's a question of who every ethic assumes that an individual will be able to act on the ethic, or we actually care about your ethic, which means if I won that his ethic is not motivational, we literally just push the famine off the bridge, and we have no motivation to do so underneath their framework categorically fails. It's not a question of what the government is, but rather individuals who make up the government, policymakers, etc., still need to be able to make that choice, and the framework cannot do so. The other arguments are compliance. They say you should just vote on your gut feelings. No, it's feelings, motivism, and sentimentalism. Distinction. Motivism is literally just what you feel. Sentimentalism is something that's become intrinsic to moral judgment over time, which is distinct from saying, I feel like I should vote affirmative, or I feel like I should vote negative. Also, they concede this argument hijacks their pain and pleasure framing, because we say that boo pain intrinsically, we say boo pain, which is a feeling, and then becomes a sentiment, which means even if they're winning the theory of pain and pleasure, it comes collapse back to my the sentimentalism framework, which point I just need to do an offensive sentiment. Now, the line the offense, the first time they say term we don't want to die. Yes, we probably do not want to die, but the recent evidence was straight up conceded as a scientific argument that says we have an innate biological need to consume more and more and more, and there's no cutoff. Think of it like Malthus's population curve. We continue to consume continue to grow until we are artificially checked back by extinction or by death or disease or famine, which means consumption is something is inevitable insofar as evolution been coded into us. We may not want to die, but evolutionarily, if it's been coded into us, that means that we have a sentiment against stopping consumption. What the one see also functions as terminal defense to the affirmative. They need to prove solvency, but if I prove this straight structure that a human neocortex is that we literally cannot do the affirmative, or passing the affirmative does nothing because we will continue to consume and continue to destroy the environment, that there's no tangible harm that they can possibly hope to solve. The height evidence, they say turn taxation and enriches on people. 8 points people have already consented to taxation, which means it's not a violation before we haven't consented to the affirmative, which means it's some sort of a violation of freedom. See, point is a question of absolutism. Taxes still have exceptions for people who are not able to pay the full scope of taxes, whereas this is a wholesale elimination, which denies, for example, poor folks' ability to have access to energy. The strong evidence say this is a semantic question. No, the affirmative literally says we ought to take an action which is distinct from emission. This is the reason why you should automatically negate in the NC frame, because we have a cognitive bias against taking action. What studies have conducted and found the fact that when we are cognitively biased against taking action, we always prefer omission, even if it is a risk of a greater harm, which means I have one framing. Look, the rhyme on the NC really the rhyme really easily on the NC. The recent evidence was severely mishandled. It's terminal defense to the app. Literally, it doesn't matter if we want to avoid extinction. It's a question of, is it evolutionarily coded into us? They've conceded scientific evidence that it indicates that it is so. That would mean you would negate. Also, this strong argument would auto-negate triply. Now, the F, the framework. I'm gonna start on the line by line, then I'll go to induction. The asymmetric argument, they just extend to say the governments must necessarily use utilitarianism, but they can say it's all fallacy. They literally just say governments have to use it. No, it's not a question. Your evidence literally just says that they are obligated to because they must be trade-offs, but that is not an obligation. That's just how governments exist currently in the status quo. They've also conceded that they do not always make trade-offs. For example, we have certain rights that are guaranteed by the Constitution, which would necessarily prove that it's not specific to the action. We don't donate on 90% of our GDP to poor countries, which means we do not care about aggregating for aggregating for our citizens. Also, I'm going for the polls argument. They say that their coverage is very loud on this issue. They say it would have led to us keeping slavery. This argument doesn't make sense insofar as polls we elected Abraham Lincoln, who then inevitably abolished slavery. It's a question of what your frame justifies, not mine. I never made a claim to saying actor specificity is good, but if actor specificity is the correct ethical theory, there's no other ethical check or no other frameworky check on actor specificity. Then actor specificity would conclude that we have feelings when you go to the polls, which means we necessarily vote for people. Now, the phenomenal intersection argument is when it's game over. He has not established a theory of utilitarianism. It just extends justifications for why government uses utilitarianism. The question is, what is utilitarianism? The one AR did no explanation of what is pain and what is terror. Insofar as one argues why we do not feel pain and pressure, that is something that's phenomenally introspection is unreliable. That means you cannot vote on utilitarianism. Governments literally have no idea what this counts. You can agree, but what is the feeling? What is death? What is feel happiness, etc. That people feel. They've conceded that framework was made comprehensive and account for all forms of ethical deliberation. Insofar as there's not a static definition, what is pain and pleasure? Masochism dispresses or egoism dispresses. I only know my own experience, and governments as sure as hell do not know what people feel, especially in context of their impacts, which are linear and structural violence that has committed against certain communities. And how do governments aggregate that? Insofar as we do not have a theory of pain and pleasure, which means it's terminal difference, affirmative, the intent force that distinguishing. They say we can necessarily foresee things. A point begs the question of whether or not we can foresee things. B point, it does lead us to being held hostage, which is not ethical decision making part of their own framework. And even if we can foresee it, it's only relevant underneath their framework. All of my arguments call into question what we can foresee. Like literally, my arguments call into question what we can foresee in relation to like what is like pain and pleasure, what is what governments care about. Now the resource just said. The 1-year coverage was really poor on this issue. Just as case outweighs, there's no warrant for this, and you should not back up. You should not make new arguments. If F&B evidence outweighs 8 point, it says it creates resources when we have a shift from renewables. 8 point outweighs 8.6 at least and more. Violence and reach which cascades and outweighs their impact on man. Should be it's a question of whether or not they can actually solve for any of their harms. They can see the rules of solvency argument, which means if I win that we do not shift from renewable, if we do not, I think it's a double line. Either 8 point we shift from renewables, which leads to resources and mass forms of violence. That means we cannot reduce warming because those forms of violence lead to more and more emissions. Or B point we did not solve, which traces roots of solvency and climate change, like the Paris Accords, create nothing. And like there's no reason but F, but negative presumption.
Okay. 5 seconds. Advantage, util, and I'll like briefly touch on the I'll like briefly go on the like 1 and C's overview with the induction fail stuff when I'm on util. Yeah. Everybody good? 1 and C2 drop the warming causes extinction of the affirmative sols that were sufficient to get below the necessary degree threshold that causes matches equal to 5 to 6 degrees. We solve a lot of linear harm as well, which is also conceded their dissent. They drop the second response to it, which is that we don't cause a global transition to renewable energy, which is what their evidence isolates as the impetus for that. If 20% of our energy sector shifted, there's no reason why that's sufficient to cause massive resource wars over the resources that are necessary for energy, which proves we have a large impact and are sufficient to reach distinction. They didn't internalize the impact of warming outweighs anyways. Framework. 2 are still conceded that actor specificity outweighs because different actors have different ethical obligations. It's not an is-ought fallacy. They conceded their explanations about how governments are able to logically and fairly justify policy, i.e. they could weigh between different people needing something, but only being able to respond to one need is by helping the most people possible. Otherwise, it would be arbitrary and unfair to one group, which isn't an is-ought fallacy, but a disruption of how the only way government can fairly allocate resources, which proves that their sort of empirical argument of how there are side constraints is the only is-ought fallacy argument in the round. Their polls argument saying that this is a necessary consequence of actor specificity doesn't apply because one argument is that we should use polls if government should help the most people possible, and second implicates their own framework because their framework says that we should abide by. The 1 and C articulated this is a reason why polls prove this sort of government actor specificity collapses to sentimentalism. The 1 and C description of this argument, they conceded this generates sort of horrendous conclusion. Just because people want something doesn't mean it's a good idea because of the beliefs they could necessarily change. Actor specificity was conceded. It's not an is-ought fallacy. It's a description of the only logical way for governments to allocate resources. I'll answer this phenomenological section stuff. The phenomenological section press doesn't apply to our framework. We had an explanation of what sort of impacts count under the arguments they made about the aggregation of pain and pleasure, which proves this doesn't apply. They conceded that it doesn't have to be fully comprehensive, just usable for governments to apply and make decisions based on the intent force they think. They just said there's no ground line for what we can foresee. Yes, we can. It's how we debate over and have debates about whether or not we can foresee the potential consequences of the plan. I know something's going to happen. Yeah, the like dumb stuff. They didn't extend any of these. There's no permissibility triggers or whatever triggers around. Induction works, which proves that we can know things are a consequence. So if I win that death turns and outweighs the NC, and we know consequences are possible to predict, then that's a reason why you should vote affirmative on the death turns and outweighs the NC arguments. NC, start on the framework. The argument I'm going for is that people are able to ignore their gut feelings or the sentiments they have in the first place. It's possible just because we have just because we have these like evolutionary instincts and reasons to do things is not something that's so always binding and always motivating. People can have alternative reasons that aren't entirely consistent with their evolutionary sentiments and can act against them or act against the feeling they have in the first place, which proves their framework is not motivational because people are able to sort of overcome those motivations and act against them. The handling of this argument in the Q&R was not very clear. Yeah, the NC. First on the death turns the NC stuff. Death definitely turns the NC. They conceded all the weighing that was in the 1AR. Death is the most basic evolutionary instinct, the foundation of all sort of adaptation and how we continue to reproduce so we can pass on our genetic traits is founded on the ability to survive and reproduce. Death entirely precludes that, which means if I win the affirmative, it's sufficient to solve mass amounts of death or even one death. It outweighs all of the offense in the NC because the sort of consumption arguments don't apply. The consumption arguments and the recent evidence are not how the 2 and R explain them. It's just that humans have a drive to consume, not that the drive to consume will always completely destroy the environment. The affirmative proves that there are solvency mechanisms and things we can do and actions we can take which are sufficient to avoid the mass sort of consumption of resources which causes extinction, which means conceding case solvency disproves this sort of terminal defense argument, and death outweighs in turn because it's the most fundamental moral sentiment and we're able to predict consequences. Good round.